Hello everybody, I'm Nora Burrows of Mostly Quilts, and this is our first of hopefully many quilt chats. So I'm by my fireplace because I thought the fireplace is a nice cozy spot for a chat. And the purpose of these quilt chats is going to be to kind of keep you updated on some of the ongoing projects that I have, as well as maybe some of the little things that I don't have specific videos for. This first one that I'm about to show you, I do not have a video on, but it's something I'm super excited about. So let's start there. So this is a quilt top that I'm making that hopefully is going to be my very first quilt pattern. I am trying to create a quilt pattern, and making this quilt is the very first step. So I would really be able to finish this quilt in a hot minute. It's not a hard quilt to make, but it's taking me a long time because what I didn't realize when you're creating patterns is, and it seems very obvious now, is how much detail you have to, like recognize in your brain, and how you're putting the pieces together and what makes, the most sense. This is going to be the first step, making the quilt, making the pattern, and then I want to make probably like 3 at least quilts from the pattern I create to make sure that there's no mistakes, because that's like my number one thing. I do not want any mistakes in this pattern. So this is the first quilt. There will be at least a couple more, but I'm pretty excited about it. I haven't even put the first quilt top together, but let me show you kind of what's going on with it here. This is just one piece of it, and it's on the, okay, so like here would be kind of the, no, that's not the top. Where's the top? You know what, let's lay this out on the ground, and I'll be able to show you a little bit better. Here is the quilt top. Not all of these pieces are sewn together, but this is just kind of the beginning of the piecing part. And I have put the ruler up here on the top. So that ruler is where the top of the quilt will be, and then this over here will be the side of the quilt. So this is working on the bias. You can see down here that here's the diagonal. And so this will connect with the bottom part of the quilt. But this is kind of what I'm thinking so far. You may recognize some of these fabrics, like this blue one I got in Connecticut on my recent trip. I have a video on that. And this brown fabric here, the dark one, was part of the fabric I bought for the Quilt of Valor that I am still making. I think I have 2 episodes on that, the Quilt of Valor. So kind of just used a lot of what I had. I didn't buy any fabric specifically for this project. These pieces in the middle, like this one and this one, are fabric that my aunt gave me from a leftover baby blanket that she was making. And this orange fabric here was part of kind of a random grab bag from a kind of crafty group that I belong to. So my thought about the pattern is that even if it takes me a couple of years to make this pattern, like, I'm in no rush. So I'm gonna just take my time with this pattern, make it as good as I possibly can, make a couple quilts out of it. So that's the idea there. Another thing I have going on, or will shortly, is a new quilt that I'm very excited about. I have never done a quilt along ever before, and I'm gonna do my first quilt along. It is by the YouTube channel Warped Spinster, which I really, really like this YouTube channel. I actually don't even know the woman's name of the channel. The channel's name is Warped Spinster, but it's this woman, and I don't know her name, but I'll find out. Anyway, she's gonna be hosting this mystery quilt along using 2.5-inch squares. And I am gonna do this quilt along with her, and I'm so excited. So she's gonna be using 2.5-inch squares, but she's also gonna be using yardage fabric, and I think her yardage fabric, she's gonna be like all white or black. But I've decided to make this a very scrappy mystery quilt project, even though I don't know what this quilt is gonna look like. And so instead of using yardage of these other kinds of fabrics with the 2.5-inch squares, I am going to use just little scraps. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully well. But the reason why I'm excited about these 2.5-inch squares is because I had already cut out a bunch of squares. So let me back up. A lot of people, when they have their scraps from a quilt project, they will automatically cut their fabric down, their extra fabric down into squares, either 10-inch squares or 5-inch squares or 2.5-inch squares. But I don't do that because I like to be able to have this flexibility with my leftover fabric. So I happened to cut down some of my scraps into 5-inch squares because I thought that I was going to be making a picnic blanket quilt, which I was very excited about. I never got to the picnic blanket quilt, but I do have these 5-inch squares. Well, did I say 2.5-inch squares? I meant 5-inch squares. These are 5-inch squares. So I don't have 2.5-inch squares, but I do have these 5-inch squares. And what happens if you cut the 5-inch squares in half? You have 2.5-inch squares. So I'm going to cut these into 2.5-inch squares for this project. Now I'll need a lot more than I have here. She says in her so she's published her verse video that tells you basically what you need, and gives you like some clues about this mystery quilt along. And then I think this upcoming Sunday she's releasing another video. I don't know if she's starting the project this upcoming Sunday or just releasing another clue. But we'll find out. So I'm gonna need more squares than I have, but I have plenty of scraps. So you should, if you want to, go check out her channel and do the quilt along, because we have she has a really cool taste in fabric, and I like to think that I have cool taste in fabric, but our fabric choices and techniques are very different from one another. So I think they'll end up looking super different. The other channel that, if you're looking for a YouTube channel to check out, is called, and this is the best YouTube channel name of any crafting or quilters out there, and I totally wish I had thought of it first, but it's called Conquering Mount Scrapmore. Conquering Mount Scrapmore, which just puts a smile on my face every single time I say it. So that woman's name is Brenda, and she does great tutorials, and they're not, some of them are tutorials and some of them are just playing with fabric, but she has this whole series on the friendship block, which I actually don't really love the friendship block in general. It's just, it doesn't speak to me. But I have come to love this friendship block. I had no idea how many different things you could do with the friendship block and how many ways you could change that block into different stuff. So if you're looking for more YouTube, check out Conquering Mount Scrapmore with Brenda. You won't be disappointed. So the next thing that I want to talk about is something kind of disappointing, but it's okay. So I just want to preface this in saying that it's okay to let projects go that aren't working. So I'm going to tell you a project that I'm going to let go, but I'm not going to fully let go. I'm kind of going to put it in a different direction. So I recently published a video, I'll link below to it, on this Halloween applique quilt block, which I think came out really cool. So all these pieces you can see are appliqued on there, and I like appliqued, this guy's bat wings, and I think it's a cool block. And I had wanted to make a quilt. I have all of these different pieces that I cut out of fabric and then put the Wonder on the back. And I think these are so cool. I love all of these, and I desperately want to use them and make a quilt out of them. But I was kind of, after I made this quilt block, and I bought a lot of fabric for this quilt. But I wanted to do kind of like this mixture of pieced blocks and then some of the blocks having applique, Halloween applique, and I still think that idea is so cool. But I had made this quilt block, and then I thought, you know what, instead of having this be the center, I wanted to do a pieced block as the center and then kind of radiate out from there. So let me find my pieced block, because I made a pieced one. Here it is. So I made this pieced block, and I think this is so cool. I love this block. And so I started playing around with this and trying to put the applique pieces around it, and even like maybe put an applique piece onto the center of the star. And I was messing around with this for a long time, and I finally realized that let's lay these out. Let me show you. Here's my pieced block, which I love. And then I was going to, maybe put this one along the top, and then make another one exactly like this one and put it underneath. And then I just started messing around with some of these other pieces, and I thought I could do like, like some of these blocks around the side or something. And I just felt that anything I did took away from this center block. And because I like the center block so much, I really just wanted to be making this quilt with this center. Like even that could be cool with the pumpkin. so I still like keep coming back to this, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make more of these blocks, and I'm not gonna worry about the applique. It's very funny because browns are not typically fabric tones that I like to quilt with. I usually like a lot brighter colors, but I've made a couple brown quilts lately, so I think that's just how I'm feeling right now. It's kind of in this like brown, taupe, black state of mind. I'm gonna make more of these blocks and make a quilt out of it. And I'm not gonna worry right now about this applique. I'm gonna put this away. I'm gonna save all of these applique pieces here. These all have the Wonder Under on the back. They're all ready to go and ready to be appliqued on. But you know, I did buy all of these fabrics here at the quilt shop when I had been intending to do this applique block, and I want to use them. And then this fabric here, which is at the bottom, this one is the one that I recently got at that estate sale, which I have a video for, which I will link below. So that's the plan. I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna put this away, and I will come back to this, I would guess. I may not. This may just be something that eventually, if I have it for a couple years, I'll just pass it on to somebody that will do something with it. And I could always just make a table runner or something like that. But I really think this could be a really cool quilt. I think this could be like the coolest quilt. I just need to find the inspiration and the direction that I think makes sense to go in. I had said I was going to do a video series on this, and then I felt like obligated to do a video series because I had said I was going to do a video series, but I don't have to do a video series on this just because I said so. I can change my mind. So not right now. Maybe I'll come back to that. Instead, I'm going to do this one. This will likely not be a video series because I think this is going to be kind of boring. I think I'm going to just make a bunch of blocks and then, you know, somehow tie them together with some sashing. But I'll keep you updated in these quilt chats so you can see my progress on that. So after that whole long description there about that Halloween quilt block, I will say that I have already made a Halloween quilt out of that fabric. I have it here. The reason why I was making another one is because this one, which I'll show you, I don't love. This is one of the first quilts that I made, and I didn't use a pattern. I just kind of started putting the pieces together to just see what would happen. And I think I could have done a better job in a variety of ways. But so you can recognize some of these, right? These are like the pieces that I cut out. You may recognize these from if you saw that Halloween quilt block applique tutorial I just put out, you'll recognize a lot of those images. So I already made a quilt out of that fabric. I have brought this quilt back out because it's Halloween time. And what I've decided to do is I think that I can make this quilt a lot better and I will like it a lot more by doing a couple of things. Number one, the binding. I machine bound this quilt, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with machine binding a quilt. I don't machine bind my quilts anymore. I hand bind my quilts because I think they just look really, really, really good. But you can see, let's see if I can show you, so the front, this is the front of the quilt, looks good. And then when you flip it over, there's like, I don't know, I just don't love it. Let me show you my one, let me show you a recent one I did that's hand bound. You'll see the difference. You can see this is the front of the quilt, and then this is the back of the quilt. And you don't have that extra little, like seamy part, right? Like you don't have that now you can machine bind better than I machine bound that quilt, and you can get it really close to the edge and make it look much nicer. But anyway, I didn't do that for the machine bound one. And hand binding, I really love. I just sit in front of the TV, sit in front of a movie, and have the quilt on top of me, which feels so good to have your quilt that you just made on top of you and hand do it. And it's really easy. There's like a gazillion YouTube tutorials out there on how to hand bind your quilts, and it's really easy. It feels hard for like the first maybe like foot of stitches, and then you're like, oh, I've got this. And then like the next couple feet, you're like, oh yes, I've got this. And then by the time you've done like one side of your quilt or like two sides of your quilt, I feel like you're just sold. At least I was. So you'll like never go back to the machine binding. But if you like machine binding, you should keep doing machine binding. This is a long story to say that I am taking the binding off of this quilt. So that's the plan. That's a plan that will make this quilt more likable in my opinion. The other thing is I've started to do, so the way that I did the quilting on this quilt is I did the stitch in the ditch. So a lot of these blocks, I just on my regular domestic machine stitched around the edge of basically all of these seams. And that's how I do a lot of my quilt. I've actually never used a long arm on my quilts. I don't love a lot of quilting. I think that the fabrics are always so cool that I really want to be able to see the fabrics. Like I feel like if I do stitching over this, it takes away, you know, from, I think sometimes you can enhance it with quilting. Like if you do a lot of like intense stitching in the negative space, right, around the solid fabric, then it really makes the images pop. And I think that's really cool. But I think that that's not always what's happening. You know, like if you were to quilt this and you have like the roses and stuff, I just feel like if you're quilting over it, you're losing a lot of the image, which is why I've done the stitch in the ditch. Now, however, on this quilt, I am going to try and do some hand quilting on this quilt. Typically, you do your hand quilting on your quilt before you put the binding on, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to perfect my binding on this quilt and then do some quilting. Now I've already done some quilting on it, so I'm kind of going back and forth, like I did some quilting on it. Not the stitch in the ditch, hand quilting. I'm doing big stitch quilting here. Let me show you a little piece. So you can see around his head, I used two strands of embroidery floss, right, all around his head, his hands, and then I still have to do around this part here. But this is called big stitch quilting. And so the goal is not to, you know, typically in hand quilting for like award-winning quilts, you want to get as small stitches as possible and have them as even, you know, the stitch on the top should be the same length as the stitch on the bottom. And with the big stitch quilting, you're not really worried about any of that. And I think it can look really cool. Let me see if I can find another piece here. So the other thing I did was I started to make these little X's in the boxes, and I really love that. And in my experimenting, I may not love everything, right? So I'm gonna take the stitches I'm about to show you, I'm actually gonna take them out. But these ones I actually don't mind, I like those in the corner. But where's the other ones? Like I did some like random stitching here. And then this I like, I outlined the hands with some big stitch quilting. So I'm kind of using this blanket as an experiment and just to kind of practice some techniques. After I do more of the big stitch quilting, I want to try some regular hand quilting on it, which I think is much different. It's a different process than the big stitch quilting is my understanding. One more thing to talk about, and then we're gonna end with a little fabric haul that I want to show you that I haven't seen yet. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But before we do that, I just wanted to say that I want to join a quilt guild. I have been apprehensive about joining a guild because of COVID and just feeling like I don't really love getting on Zoom calls and things like that. Like that kind of goes back to my whole technology thing where I'm like trying to get onto the call and I'm calling for my husband to come, like, I can't figure out what this is. And then by the time I get on these things, I'm like stressed out and agitated. And so the idea that the guilds weren't really meeting in person and that, like, you know, it was like these great speakers and stuff like that, but everything was online, and I just don't love that. But I get it, and that's what had to happen, and people were flexible. But I wasn't going to be flexible if I didn't need to be flexible, so I wasn't going to join a guild. But now that things are starting to open back up, people are vaccinated, more things are happening in person. You know, my local quilt shop, I'm going to be taking a class from them in a couple of weeks on applique, actually, which will be, maybe that will be, you know, like a good trigger to get me back into that Halloween applique quilt. But you know, these kinds of things are happening. People are taking classes and things like that in person. So I'm gonna join my Quilt Guild. I've looked a couple times on the website. I think it's like really easy to join. You basically just like send in a check. I think it's only like $25. And then you're like on their email or something. I don't know. I'll let you know on the next Quilt Chat. I'm gonna send my check in before that and maybe send off an email to be like, what's up with this guild? But I'm really excited about the potential of being part of a quilting guild, and I'd love to hear about your experiences with a guild. I have heard some not so great things, but I kind of feel like it's about how, like, the not about my guild. I actually know nothing about my guild. I don't know anybody in the guild. I haven't heard a word about the guild. I have no clue. But I've heard some things from other people in other parts of the country where they say people can get like a little bit competitive with their quilts, and people can, you know, do their showing of their quilts, and then other members of the guild might be not so supportive of their quilt or things like that. But I think it could be really cool. So I wanted to say that. I wanted to say that I'm going to be joining a guild, I hope. I'm at least sending in the check. We'll see what happens. Last thing is a fabric haul, and I have not seen this fabric yet. I have no idea what is in this bag, but I am part of this local group called Flair that kind of is this community of people who make crafts of all different kinds. And so some of it is quilting, some of it is sewing, some of it is woodworking, or you know, wreath making, all kinds of things. There was an opportunity recently for people who are part of this Flair group to give $60 into this pot, and then they basically bought fabric with the $60 and divvied it up between the people who had given the $60 each. And the idea is that when you have more money to spend on the fabric, you get better deals and that kind of thing, and so you can get more fabric, from quality fabric, from your quilting store. If you go in as a group. That's the idea. So I got my bag the other day. I actually haven't looked at it yet, which is crazy. I was waiting until I did this video to look at the fabric, but I'm gonna grab it now. I have it right here. And I have seen kind of just like the top. So I kind of just got, that's like what I've seen. What you've seen is what I've seen now. But I'm loving this green that I see already. So let's see what's in here. And this feels like a lot of fabric for $60. Typically, they do like fat quarters and like half yards, that kind of thing. So I have this fabric and I love it. I love when I get fabric that I already have, because I feel like it's adding to, you know, whenever I buy fabric, I'm like, oh, I'll just get a yard. But then if I have like an extra bit, I can put it with that. So this is really cool. I've had a hard time figuring out what to do with this fabric, actually. I bought this not for a specific project. I bought this to do some of the English paper piecing hexagons, because I thought that the hexagons would look really cool, which they will. So I need to figure out what to do with that, but I'm glad that I have an extra little bit. And then this looks like a red solid, but with these like little bits of, like I see some birds in there, and like an X there, so that's really cool. Oh, a bee. Here, let's see the bee. There it is. I like solids that have something going on besides just the solid. I used to say that I was morally opposed to solids, which I was always joking, but I was kind of serious. Like, I don't like quilting with solids, and recently I've really expanded out of that, and I have started using some solids, and I totally get it. But point being, I like that red because it has like a little bit of things going on. It's just not the red. So here's a yellow. This is the kind of thing I really like. I wonder, you know, if this is a batik. That's a yellow batik. Ooh, this almost looks like a recreation fabric, but I could be wrong, I don't know. But I love that kind of like grayish, greenish blue color. That's a great color. This is very, very cool. I mean, that's like so bird-like, and it completely matches what I'm wearing right now. I love this color, this orangey, kind of rusty, browny color. Really have started using a lot of browns in my quilting. Almost looks like a swan, doesn't it? Like the birds make kind of this swan pattern. The cool thing about, so I've done this is the second time that I've done this fabric haul. I call it a fabric haul from Flair, where they pick out the fabric and you don't know what you're getting, is that you get stuff that you wouldn't normally buy in the store. So last time, here, let me show you. So in the last haul that I got from Flair, this orange that I showed you earlier, that was part of the haul. And then this orange as well, right here, was also part of it. And those are things that I don't know if I would pick out myself, but then you have this whole bit of fabric that is a little bit out of your box, which I think that's the point of doing these creative things like quilting, is pushing those sides of your comfort level in terms of your creativity. So that's what I love about these fabric hauls from Flair, is that you're not picking out the fabric. And so some of the fabric you might be like, ooh, I don't know about that one. And you can either put that in like with your scraps or pass it on to a friend, or keep it. Like, I wouldn't pass it on. I would keep it and see how you can work it into your projects. So this is one, I was saying all that because this is one that I'm not so sure about. Like, that's not really quite my thing, but it could be really cool if I have to use my brain and think about how to use it in a way that I would like it, right? That's a great color. You can't go wrong with a floral gray. Is that floral? Those are like, I think those are like, what are those? I wouldn't consider those flowers. Those are like dandelion pieces maybe, or something. This might be a batik. Let's see. Yes, this is a batik. And the batiks also, I think all the batiks that I own have come from this fabric haul and the last one, because I don't usually work with batiks. And I was actually thinking the other day how, because I don't usually work with solids and I don't usually work with batiks, that it would be really cool to do a like a quilt improv, like an improv quilting, only with batiks and solids, like all mixed together. I think that could be really cool. And I might do a video on that. Improv quilting with batiks and solids. Now that I've said it, I'll feel more inclined to do it. This is cool. I love that. That would make a great bag. And another batik. Oh. Who does this fabric? This feels very tulip pink to me, but I don't think it is. It's Allison Glass. Allison Glass for Andover Fabrics. This is really cool. I actually might need to go and buy a little bit more yardage of this fabric here. I love this. This piece might be my favorite so far. Blue batik, very water-like. Here's one that isn't really my style, but I'll make it fit. We'll make it work. And a red batik. Oh, this is great. I must be on a neutral kick. I've been buying a lot of blacks and white combos, or like blacks and taupe combos. Like when I recently went to that estate sale of the famous quilter Carol Taylor, I got some prints of hers that were blacks and taupes. I have a video for that. I'll link it below. But this I love. This is great. This is kind of like where I am in my life right now, I think, is this kind of color palette and pattern. This is perfect. I really like this. That's a really good one. And two more batiks. This one is great. The next one I'm going to show you, I'm really excited about. So the next one, I had a piece of this batik from, I don't even know where. I mean, it wasn't from Flair, because I got it so long ago. And I just used it in really random projects. I wouldn't have bought it out of the store, so I don't know where it came from, if it was gifted to me or what. But this is very similar to it. I was able to use this in so many different projects. It just felt like it went with everything, and it's gone. Like, I used the whole thing, so that's great. And then here's the green. Green is my favorite color. Now, when I was in elementary school, my best friend Hannah, her favorite color was green. And in elementary school, I hadn't decided yet what my favorite color was. And when she said her favorite color was green, I immediately realized oh my God, I love green. That's my favorite color. But I didn't want to copy her. So I couldn't have the same favorite color as Hannah. And so I settled for, I don't even know what my favorite color was until I went to college, and then I was like, well, I can have my favorite color be whatever I want my favorite color to be, and so it was green. So my favorite color is green, and I really like an olive green, or a green with a little bit of lime color in it. So this is really great, and it has this one has specks of red and yellow in it. So that's it. That's the fabric haul, and that's our quilt chat. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.